Greetings everyone, I'm very happy to introduce you to my Necromancer if you want to hit enemies with more than 50 million damage. It's quite a fun and strong build to play if you want to farm the level 100 or push in higher difficulties, whether you are playing in solo or in a party. Also, my personal highest damage done is 58 millions and I'll be happy to compare with your numbers whether you're playing this build or not, so feel free to post your highest damage in the comments. Lastly, if it's not done already, don't forget to subscribe. Let's start with the skills, and you want to play the corpse tendrils in order to apply vulnerable, but also of course to pack enemies. Then you have the corpse explosion for the essence and damage boost, and the Iron Maiden for the life and the essence. You want blood mist in order to be invulnerable, but also to automatically cast corpse tendrils, because when you cast the blood mist it will lay down a corpse and use the corpse tendrils with the associated heart. After that you have the Bone Splitters as a base skill and of course Bone Spirit. For the gear we'll use this unique herb because it gives us essence, critical strike damage and physical damage even if we won't use this passive. Then we also use this armor, it will give you +4 to Bone Spirit and also damage after picking up a blood orb. Additionally, you'll also get a free cast of Bone Spirit. For the glove and the passive you want increased critical strike damage and on it critical strike chance, intelligence and if possible bone damage. For the pants, the fact that you can have a blood orb using a corpse and of course life, intelligence and so on. For the boots, first you'll also need Bone Spirit in order to have 13 to Bone Spirit and if possible intelligence too. For the passive, either stun enemies or increase movement speed after critical strike. You should not take the passive which trigger corpse explosion with the blood mist because it will prevent you to use corpse tendril during the blood mist, so make sure to have one of these two aspects. For the weapon, increase damage on distance for Bone Spirit, and you'll want intelligence, vulnerable damage, critical strike damage. Be careful, don't take increased damage to injured enemies because we'll one-shot them so it won't be useful. If possible, don't take this affix in your wall equipment. For the ring, for the stats, you want critical strike chance, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, physical damage, bone damage, and so on. For the power, increase damage based on your resource and one utility aspect in order for you to gain more essence. Lastly, for the amulet, bone skill damage, intelligence, and the fact that corpse tendril will grant you increased critical strike chance and damage. If you prefer, you can also swap these passives, it's overall the same effect. For the gems you'll put rubies for the life and either critical strike damage to crowd control enemies or critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. For the heart, first you want this one, it's mandatory to have it in order to increase your critical strike damage, and second one that you must have is this one which will trigger the corpse. Lastly, the aura with Decrepify, you can also put another heart if you want, but if you do so, you should play Decrepify instead of Iron Maiden. For the Book of the Dead, increase critical strike chance, there we have increased essence, it's more interesting than this one for this build, and after that on the golem, increase critical strike damage. Now for the skill tree you want to have the Bone Splitters with the vulnerable. If you like a bit of critical strike chance you can also consider this, and after we have just 1 point here and 3 points in the essence. You also have our blood mist with the fact that you have corpse, 1 point in corpse explosion and 3 points in both of them. Then you have the curse with the essence and the life, increased damage to cursed enemies, increased damage to close enemies and damage reduction, increased damage to distant enemies. After we have the corpse tendrils with the vulnerable effect, of course our Bone Spirit with increased critical strike chance, but if you like a bit of essence you can also go for this passive, and we take the 3 passives here. We don't need this one because we don't have any ultimate. Lastly, some passive for increased attack speed, here you have damage reduction and increased sacrifice value, and of course ossified essence as a K passive. For the Paragon, since I'm close to level 100, I can show you directly in the game, but of course you have the builder if you need to have the full Paragon setup. First we start with control in order to boost our damage to crowd control enemies, and the first board which will increase bone damage and essence. You also have this glyph which will give us a bit of fortify in order to play the glyph with fortification. It's not mandatory to have it right now, but it's interesting to put it there because it will boost the bone skill damage here. Then on your left you don't take this passive, and we have this glyph increase damage while healthy. After that we go this way and we take this glyph for the vulnerable damage, this passive to increase damage using corpse, and at the bottom this glyph increase damage while fortified. You don't need this passive just here, and you want the critical strike damage here, and lastly the last glyph increase critical strike damage, and the board is the board of willpower. We don't take this one obviously, but it's interesting because you have some damage while fortified on this last board. For the gameplay I put you two parts, the first one Nightmare Dungeon 45 and the second one Nightmare Dungeon 60. Just make sure to use the Blood Mist in order to create a corpse and automatically trigger the tendrils. After that you simply have to use your nuke in order to kill your enemies in one shot. It's not mandatory to always use this combo, but just avoid to not do a critical strike with a Bone Spirit, because otherwise you won't have this 7 seconds cooldown reduction and you lose a bit of time. I hope that you'll have as much fun as I did playing this build, and as usual, if you have any question, feel free to post in the comments.